Hey everybody, today I'm going to be reviewing Fantastic Planet. This film came out in 1973. It was directed by Renee Leloux. Before he became a director, he actually took a job where he worked in a mental institution for a time. And that's when he kind of started experimenting with different styles of animation and performance. And he would put on these puppet shows with the inpatients there. And I don't know, there's something about knowing that. And then you look at the animation and its style, and it's like, it's not necessarily direct, but it's like you can feel that influence, that mood. There is inherently an irony to the style of it in terms of the way it affects you and just in terms of the way it looks. And I find that to be really unique. There is kind of a rudimentary quality. It's definitely childlike, but at the same time it feels mature. Like I said before, the movement of the different creatures and such, it has a very kind of spliced, kind of fragmented sort of quality, and there is just a natural simplicity to it. Yet at the same time, there is a lot of detail, just kind of the sketchy nature of it, just kind of the individual strokes. You can feel kind of the texture of everything, and obviously, you know, all these different species that they've created. As far as just the planet is concerned, I think there's just a fabulous sense of world building in this movie. Just the detail and the look of the plants and the animals and just observing them in their environments is very, it's just interesting. It has a very aquatic kind of subterranean quality to it, and it really did remind me of, you know, like maybe some night you're really high in the middle of the night and you're watching, you know, like one of those awesome Discovery Channel documentaries where it's like underwater and you see all of these different sea creatures that you never knew existed. They're so beautiful and colorful and bright, and it's like, how does all of this exist so many miles beneath the surface and we never get to see it? Totally had that feeling when I'm watching this movie. Everything that moves here I think is interesting, and I love how everything really operates on its own set of logic, and yet that logic does make sense as it pertains to this particular world. It feels like everything is thought through, I guess. It all just kind of blends together in a very authentic sort of lysergic harmony, I guess you could say. And yet it's still, as I said, very simplistic too, and there is a sense of innocence about, you know, just the look of everything. And the juxtaposition to me is something that I find myself constantly hanging on to. And of course, this was made in the 1970s and the acid era. And when I watch this movie, it certainly reminds you of like Terry Gilliam, especially like Monty Python, and images of maybe Yellow Submarine, an animated movie that I absolutely adore, perhaps one of my favorites. And certainly kind of that flavor of like Alejandro Jodorowsky surrealism. And any of what I just mentioned, if any of that kind of stuff floats your boat at all, then I think you know whether or not you're going to like this movie or you're not going to like it. But you know, this film is very French, and it absolutely has such a European feel in terms of the style of animation. Everything has a delicacy to it, kind of like an effeminate Rococo kind of flavor, it feels like. And you have these big blue creatures that are reminiscent of humans in terms of like anatomy and all that, but they're called drags. They're much bigger than humans though. Humans, or ohms as they're referred to here, are kind of seen as lesser than the drags, or definitely seen as lesser than the drags. And so, you know, they can keep them as house pets. We have an ohm protagonist here who is taken in by the drags, and he becomes kind of a house pet after his mother dies. And they dress him initially in like, you know, what looks like some sort of like French clown circus getup or something. Very, very interesting. I do like the juxtaposition too between the humans, or the ohms, whatever, and the drags, in the sense that there's more of a primal quality, more of a survival quality, naturally, as you would assume, you know, to the animals, to the humans in particular. And then there's something actually more cerebral and maybe more elegant, more academic about the drags, perhaps more innovative just as a species. And I do like, just in the animation, there's kind of like a feeling of 1950s influence of technology, like circuitry kind of surging through everything, because it is the natural world, but it's also a constructed world to an extent. But overall, I will say, just when I look at the entire world, it feels very much like a Salvador Dali painting. Very grotesque, almost as if it's suspended in some other dimension or something, and it's very blank, almost void-like. And the fragmented style of the movement for me just feels very psychedelic in nature, because there's something kind of mirage-like about LSD, like the experience of it, where it's like you're trying to grasp at something, but you can never really make sense of it because you're not supposed to be able to make sense of it. It's not real, but you cannot understand why, or your eyes cannot make that connection. And there is a similarity to this film at certain points. For example, the protagonist, when he is a child in the beginning of the film, he sneaks in and sees like this ritual of sorts that the adults are partaking in. And the movement of everything as they're doing it, the art, it just kind of dissolves one into the other, kind of overlapping in a way that it has that kind of mirage, like kind of lethargic feeling to it. And it really just kind of hypnotizes you, draws you forward in a way that is very interesting, as I've said. The film is a mix of Czechoslovakian and French influence. Leloux did collaborate here quite heavily with Roland Topor. And Topor was Jewish, and he was living in Paris in the 1930s, so I think he could lend a bit of his own experiences with oppression that are heavily included in this film. I like the subversion of the way humans are treated here. They're treated as I said before, they are the inferior species here, and we see them as kind of like slaves or house pets initially, but it doesn't necessarily make the drag seem evil. I never got the sense that they were in the beginning of it. They're doing, I think, just, what they would do. And really the same could be said for both species. They're doing what they think is right, whether or not it's correct or not, is up for debate. But both certainly have their strengths and both have their weaknesses. And like I said before, they're also fairly the same, just in mentality when it really comes down to it. They really are not that different from one another, and I think that's the key. I think that's perhaps why I'm drawn to it. Yes, it is simple, but I do think it is a somewhat effective example of social oppression due to circumstance. And it's maybe more about circumstance, maybe less of an emotional experience as far as the film is concerned. And yeah, as I said, the film has an innocence to it. It's a bit rudimentary in style. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But at the same time, there's certain things about it that are maybe a little bit awkward or the pacing at times can feel a little bit abrupt or confusing. I do think that the film really lacks something meaty about the climax in the third act. But also at the same time, I like the distance in another way. There's kind of a storybook quality to it, and the flatness of the image kind of takes on a special mood to me. Yes, it does work as like a political allegory or a cautionary tale, if you will, but I do like to look at it more just kind of as a product of the acid era and just kind of a fun, lethargic movie where you can see a lot of creativity going on there, and I do enjoy the dated nature of it. I do enjoy kind of those 1970s movies. The dated nature of it has a real charm about it to me. A lot of those things really work in its favor. As an example, the score is very much a product of its era. It's like this kind of, like acid progressive rock, but also has kind of a funky jazz quality to it. And I don't know, that really eases you into the feeling, into the mood of everything. And I don't know, there's just something, like I said, about the mood to it. And just, the background of Leloux and his experience, especially in the mental institutions, I really do think informs his style and what makes it very unique, why this film stands out as something very interesting, even for animated films. If you like real trippy kind of stuff, absolutely, this is up your alley, and it is a Criterion release. But yeah, that is the review. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website as always. It is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist and I do commission portraits, and I also sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons who have been wonderful. Thank you guys so much for your support. If you are interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.